This is Capital Games Movie Club. I am the Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
Zero. Hey, man, how you doing?
I'm alright.
Good. Good to hear. Good to hear. Yep, we're back. Sorry we took a week off. I had some issues I had to deal with, so we are back now. I'm going to try and make it more apparent when I might not be able to make the podcast. So, again, sorry about that. But we're going to do a review right now of Denis Villeneuve's 2016 sci-fi film Arrival, starring Amy Adams, Jeremy Renner, Forest Whitaker, and Michael Stuhlbarg, directed by Denis Villeneuve. A lot of these films, Zero, when they go into alien invasion films, or alien contact films is what I call them, because if they're alien invasion, I think that's a much different flavor of a sci-fi film than what this is. They seem to go through certain type of steps each time. Like let's go into our experience for these types of films. What are your experiences of these types of films? Have you seen other films like it?
God, it's probably been a while.
Okay.
I know there was the old movie Contact. I thought it was okay. It wasn't exceptional or anything.
Yeah.
And then I think really just the alien contact, the concept of alien contact is something I'm more familiar in the novel space, because I remember when I was in high school, one of my book report assignments was, I think it was a Michael Crichton, one of the books that that kind of reminded me of sort of like the idea of alien contact was the novel Sphere by Michael Crichton.
Oh yeah.
And I thought that was a pretty good book at when I'd read it back in high school. So that's kind of where most of my experience with like the plot line of Alien Contact has been.
That movie is awful, by the way. Oh my God.
Yeah, I remember hearing that the movie adaptation was awful.
Yeah, good actors in that movie, but awful movie. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Contact, because when I was watching this movie, the first thing I kept saying to myself, "Oh, don't do a contact, don't do a contact, don't do a contact." That's what I was so afraid of. I was like, "Oh shit, they're doing a contact." No, but yeah, I'm vaguely familiar with these types of films, but they do seem to go for, and most space movies nowadays do as well, where in order to not just make it about the grandness of space travel or dealing with people from outer space, they make it more of a personal story in some rudimentary ways. And Arrival does that to a certain extent, but I think it does it in a different way. So why don't you want to just get to the review? And
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the review of Arrival, starring Amy Adams, Jeremy Renner, Forest Whitaker, and Michael Stuhlbarg. The movie does go into standard tropes involving alien contact or space travel in this. And whereas they not only go into the enormity of the situation, but they personalize it to a certain extent to make it more about the characters than it really is about the alien contact in this. And throughout the film, they allude to something happening to the main character in the film, which is why I was really afraid that when they kept going back and forth to this specific thing, that it was gonna be a contact situation. And you know what? Let's spoil Contact real quick. Contact is a 1996 film from Robert Zemeckis, starring Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey. The big thing with Contact is that Contact did well in the box office. People watched it. But the thing that pissed people off about it was that throughout this entire film, you were wondering, oh my God, what do these aliens look like? Who are these aliens? Who are these aliens? And then at the end of the movie, you realize that it was the main character's father, in like a weird kind of offshoot mental kind of way. It was really weird to a certain extent, which pissed people off to a certain extent. I thought it was okay, but I still was like, really? Is this what we're doing now? Okay, sure. I was afraid that Arrival was going to go that way, and it kind of didn't. But it still went to that territory where, in order to, I guess the problem is, Zero, in a film, that it's really hard to contextualize without going into bombacity. The enormity of the situation of people from other planet visiting us without us trying to get a tether on something that's more personable. What were your thoughts on, I'm not spoiling what that personable thing is, but what were your thoughts on that concept?
For which movie?
Oh, I'm sorry, on Arrival.
I thought the way that Arrival did it was actually kind of neat, especially because just much like you, I was worried. I was like, oh no, this is an Alien Contact movie. Just if it's anything like Contact, oh god, this is going to be a bad time. And just the way they sort of did it was really good, and in my opinion, it was pretty clever as well too.
The way they did it is clever. I mean, if I were to tell you, I guess if I were to tell you about the film, okay, and go blow by blow as to what the movie is about from beginning to end, either you would be a little confused because I would have to go through all sorts of hoops to really get to exactly what's happening, or I would have to tell you it in a certain way, and it will just seem kind of rote to a certain extent. But Arrival does some clever things in this movie that I think stands it out from other types of films other type of films that it's trying to not emulate, but that it's like we can't get any further into that without going to spoilers. So let's just get into the direction and the look of the film. And I saw a lot of people complain after I saw this film about how dark the movie is. Why is it so dreary? Why is it so oppressive? Why does it seem so why is it so black? Why is it so dark? And I didn't have that problem really, because it still felt. I don't think oppressive is really the right term for it, but realistic isn't either. But I think it just matches the situation, because you have these characters who don't know the intention of these other beings, and the other beings don't know our intentions either, the intentions either of the main characters. So it's not a happy situation. It is a tense situation that we don't know what to expect. So I thought the look of the film was actually well used in this.
Yeah, to the point that it wasn't oppressive, there was definitely a feeling of uncertainty, and I think just how the colors were used definitely depicts that so very well, because I mean, it's just kind of the situation of things, because Louise, Amy Adams' character, she's kind of tripping out that, you know, just she's trying to decode the intentions of these creatures. And then of course Jeremy Renner's character Ian, he's trying to also decode the intentions, and it's kind of one of those situations that, yeah, just these beings, they don't look humanoid, and because they don't look humanoid, everyone in the world is kind of panicking, trying to figure out what they want and everything. So I think the use of the kind of dark and drab colors definitely gives you the feeling of uncertainty, and it uses it to great effect.
Yes. And a lot of people were, I think where the oppressiveness comes from is that a lot of the movie is within the tent and is within that room that the aliens are in, that Louise and Ian's character are talking in. And I get to that extent, it might seem a little cold and oppressive, but if you take a step back, it's set in a huge land, and I mean huge land, of green and hills and everything, with this majestic beauty that's surrounding it, with these clouds and this beautiful looking, I would say striking looking setting that they have throughout the entire film. As much as it shapes oppressiveness, there is a grand space that people, I think, are missing in this. Look at the example of Louise's house. It is a box-like house with a lot of windows. It is looking upon a river, or I think an ocean, waves and everything, which I don't know how a professor can make that much money and have that type of house, but we'll get past that. I think this was more of a lines of that the key scenes in the movie were in, I guess, not oppressive spaces, but in confined spaces that made people think it was oppressive and dark and kind of dreary. Where I look at it really the opposite is where the important things may happen in those areas, but what's being said throughout the film and shown is much more open than it really lets on. I think it's actually a nice juxtaposition that it does that. So, okay, let's get into performances. I am an unabashed Amy Adams fan. This woman can act out of a paper bag if she could. Like, she is amazing. Let me just put it this way, okay? She made a kids movie one of my favorite movies of that year. She is fantastic. I don't know if you ever heard of a movie called Enchanted. It sounds absolutely corny, dude. Okay, let me just tell you the story of Enchanted. Enchanted is about a cartoon Disney princess who basically finds a portal to the real world, and she has to find a way to live throughout that world. It sounds so stupid and corny, but Amy Adams plays that character in human form, and she is charming as hell in that movie. And she made that movie great in that. But that's not the only other movies that she's done that she's fantastic in. She's been in American Hustle. She's been in she was in the HBO series Sharp Objects. She's a fantastic actress. And she does very good in this movie. I just don't think it's not one of her best performances, but I think mainly because I don't think that was the purpose of that character, to give that great of a performance. I think she's actually very solid in this movie. What are your thoughts on Amy Adams?
I loved her performance in here, and I believe, if I remember reading some of the directing notes on this, apparently she actually studied with a linguist to kind of nail the depiction of a linguist learning a completely alien language. So she definitely nailed the portrayal of someone trying to grasp the linguistics of the language, and it came off very convincing, at least to me.
A lot of really good actors do that. I mean, if I recall, for example, Daniel Day-Lewis, before he did Phantom Thread, I think he shadowed a bunch of designers and stuff to get into the head of his character. A lot of actors do that, and that's what makes good actors great actors at some points. But yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all with this. I think the performance I'm surprised by is Jeremy Renner in this. Jeremy Renner usually plays characters that are cold or absolutely fucking nuts. Like, if you've seen The Town, like, his character is insane, and he does really good in that movie. I have never seen him play a sensitive, kind of introspective, I guess the best way I could say it is a kind of a beta male sort of character in this, but he's actually very good in that. I'm trying not to use beta in a derisive way. I know in common lingo now it's derisive, but basically somebody who is not a leader. He plays the character of Ian very well, and I actually thought his performance was pretty damn good in this. He's actually a good actor. I do have to give him credit for that, but since he's been doing just Marvel for the past, 8 years, everyone just knows him as Hawkeye, but he's actually pretty damn good when he gets to stretch his legs out. I think he proves it here. I think he actually is the best performance of this movie, in my opinion.
He plays, I guess, a little bit of a more analytical role, especially when Amy Adams' character makes the major breakthrough. So he sort of follows her lead because she has the better lead, crypting the language and everything. I think that's kind of the portrayal that kind of comes about and everything, because he starts off real arrogant, like I know how to do this. Just use math. That's all you need. Math can solve this problem in a hurry and everything. And of course, just the more and more he starts to kind of look into Louise's method, he's just like, okay, interesting method, but I think it's slow. But when her method ends up making a huge breakthrough, he's like, okay, well, let me just go ahead and follow your lead then, and I'll try to use math and analytics to sort of organize your breakthroughs and everything.
Other performances, I mean, Forrest Whitaker is okay. Michael Stuhlbarg is okay. I usually like Michael Stuhlbarg, but he kind of has a one-note character. Same with Forrest Whitaker. I mean, But the two main performances are Renner and Adams, and they are good. I think Renner is very good. I think Adams is good, but it's not to the best of what she's done in the past. But they're solid, and for the two leads to be pretty damn good, that's pretty good for the movie. We're gonna get the spoilers for Arrival. If you haven't seen Arrival, you can stop now and come back when you're ready. We're getting the spoilers for Arrival in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I think the thing that really fascinated me the most about this movie was just the application of linguistics theory is very, very, very true. And I say this as a person who's a polyglot who speaks several languages and can read several languages.
Okay.
Some of these languages I can't read fluently, or some of them I can read just enough to get me into trouble. But with learning all the languages that I have learned, it always has been centered on learning the basics. And then from there, you use the basics as a foundation and building blocks to learn more complex thoughts and words in a language that is foreign to you. And I thought that was kind of excellent that the movie sort of delves into this, that, they're trying, you've got Louise and Ian trying to figure out how these heptapods speak. And of course, just in the beginning, kind of like I referenced to in the portrayal of the characters, Ian just kind of looks at it as kind of a brute force sort of thing, going, just show them a bunch of equations and stuff like that, and just all alien beings speak the language of math. That this should be easy. And of course, Louise kind of steps back and says, no, we need to establish the ground rules and the basics of language to make sure that these beings understand how we're talking to them and we understand how they're speaking with us. And then just you see kind of several scenes of them taking whiteboards, scrawling words and concepts, and then demonstrating the concepts. Like when they're trying to demonstrate that humans walk, they have whiteboards scrawled with the word walk, and then one of them is just kind of walking right in front of these heptapods. And then of course the heptapods kind of reciprocate and go show a circular glyph representing the concept that they're learning and everything. And for me, I just thought it was just kind of awesome to see sort of the applied principles of just learning a different language being accurately represented, because usually movies take so much liberty on stuff like this. Like, it'll be like, oh, this character's a linguistics genius, and they're learning advanced words like right from the get-go. And it's just like, that might be a 1 in a million scenario, but most people don't learn language that way. That's just not how it is. So I thought the whole sequence of just learning the languages and the glyphs of the heptapods was just so fascinating to me.
What's interesting, and it's something that, to be quite honest, I wasn't really familiar with. So it was interesting seeing those aspects get through. And I thought that might have been a little bit of a hard thing to actually come across, I guess, but it actually was pretty understandable as time went on throughout the film. I guess the only thing I had an issue with in regards to the linguistics of it is that I still don't quite understand how the main character was able to decipher those glyphs into words to a certain, like, how is she able to actually pinpoint, like, oh, so when this glyph is curved this way and breaks out to the left, that means this. That's where I was kind of like, I don't understand that specifically.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where they sort of gloss over it, but my guess is the assumption is that Ian basically takes like his mathematics knowledge and sort of applies it to kind of like, I guess, some sort of character recognition software, and then they basically build out the vocabulary database and everything. So they kind of gloss over that real fast of, oh, hey, Amy made Louise made this huge discovery on, this glyph means to speak or something. Okay, so boom, we've got it in the database, because I think the assumption is partly based on when you see just all the military staff with like sort of cameras and stuff like that, just equipment just set up to sort of record the sessions to kind of grasp the glyphs that they're showing and everything. And it gets really interesting towards the later part of the movie because they end up building enough of a vocabulary to start speaking with the two heptapods in the craft that landed out in the U.S. and everything, that they basically just have a giant screen that sort of presents sort of a series of glyphs to these heptapods in order to communicate with them. And I thought that was just kind of cool to see that, just they sort of found a system to communicate with these alien beings and everything.
It's not enough for me to knock it, but that's where I was kind of okay, I gotta stretch my credulity a little bit on that. But no, it was definitely interesting to a certain extent. But did it make sense to you? Is my question.
In my mind, it did.
Okay, cool.
But so long and short of the movie for anyone is essentially Earth gets these 12 pods that start dropping in just sort of random countries, and in these pods there are alien beings in there, and the movie kind of starts off with everyone sort of panicking. They don't know what these aliens want. They don't know what their intentions are, and of course just Louise ends up sort of getting an invitation to come aboard a U.S. military team to start trying to decode what these alien beings are trying to communicate, because he apparently had some huge breakthroughs in decoding how some terrorist organizations had spoken, and ended up providing the military with intelligence in order to decrypt what these terrorist groups were saying. So that was kind of what gave her credence to her expertise in language. So she gets recruited, and then so does Jeremy Renner's character, Ian, though Ian's specialty is in mathematics. It's kind of interesting because the movie starts out with just Louise reminiscing about loss and everything. So you start off kind of assuming that, just she takes her job at the university as kind of a means to deal with her loss and everything. And then, of course, this whole alien arrival event starts to happen. And of course, just things start to get increasingly interesting the more she starts to learn about the heptapod's language and everything. It gets interesting because she starts seeing what seems like flashbacks of events, but some of these events have not even happened at all.
Right.
And it just kind of becomes increasingly confusing because she doesn't know what in the world's going on. And then at the same time, Ian kind of goes off with, "Hey, I've been meaning to ask you something. Have you been dreaming in their language?" And of course, she sort of dismisses it as something just kind of completely unbelievable and everything. But the more and more she studies, the more and more just she starts seeing all sorts of weird visions. And eventually she starts to see visions of things in the future that have not happened. And that's kind of where things get really interesting. And where things sort of start taking a turning point is one of the international factions who's been trying to deal with their own heptapod craft and the heptapod representatives was the Chinese. And the Chinese have been trying to communicate with them using the game of Mahjong. And this is what Louise's character denotes about them trying to use the game of Mahjong to communicate. A game is all about winning and losing, and it's not really good for kind of determining nuance, because of the fact that with a game there are winners and there are losers. And with every game, you want to be the winner, you don't want to be on the losing side. And apparently in one of the communication sessions that the Chinese military has with the heptapods, they end up talking about a weapon. And they talk about the weapon, this weapon in the perspective of winning and losing. So of course the Chinese take this as basically the heptapods are being hostile, saying, "We have weapons." And of course, just Louise, being the linguistics expert that she is, she thinks that the Chinese are jumping to conclusions because she feels that the word weapon could mean a tool. And of course, while this is all happening and she's trying to figure out what the intention of using the word weapon is, kind of taking parallels to real life, the news ends up getting a leak about the Chinese incident, about just the heptapods basically stating that they have weapons. And of course, it causes mass panic on Earth and everything. And then, unfortunately, you've got like a rogue unit of guys in the U.S. military location where Louise and Ian are stationed at. They decide to basically try to just eliminate the heptapods. They're just like, all right, let's go with what the Chinese think. The Chinese think that these beings are absolutely hostile. We have to eliminate them for the sake of the human race. While they're trying to set up explosives in their chamber, Louise and Ian are inside the chamber just trying to desperately communicate with them to basically say, hey, what do you mean by the word weapon? Because we've got other factions on Earth who are freaking the hell out. While this is all happening, they don't notice that there's a bomb that was planted behind them. And of course, the two heptapods are trying to do their due diligence and warn them, saying, hey, there is a significance to our words, but they keep repeating one glyph a whole bunch of times before the explosives go off. And right before the explosions go off, they forcibly eject both Ian and Louise to try to save their lives and everything. And of course, the aftermath of this is just the rogue unit is assumedly detained by the rest of the U.S. military, but the whole world is in panic because of this hostile action. And all of the ships have basically just started to set up into a formation as if they've just given up on the human race. This is happening. Louise is trying to decode this giant message where they had repeated just a bunch of glyphs a whole bunch of times. And Ian tries to look over things with her, and they determine that the word that they're repeating a whole bunch is the word for time. So Louise ends up basically figuring out something, so she desperately tries to go back to the craft to talk to these beings and everything. On going back to the vessel that landed in the US, it turns out that one of the heptapods is in what they call a death cycle, so it's presumed that the other alien being has died from this explosion. But the other alien being basically says, what we're trying to tell you is that our language is a weapon, because in 3,000 years' time, we will come back to humanity to request humanity's help with a threat much greater than you can ever believe. And with our language, you are able to see time in a non-linear way. You can see both past and future, but only if you can start to grasp the mastery of our language and start to teach the human world how to use our language in a way to prevent a disaster that'll happen within 3,000 years' time. So she makes this huge discovery, and of course, the military's freaking out and going, nope, just these beings look like they're going to do something hostile. We've got to evacuate. This is where things get real chaotic. Louise starts to see visions of things in the future, things in the past, and everything just seems to blend together. But she starts to see a very significant vision at the end. She sees the Chinese General Shang, at kind of like a huge symposium event. Of course, she's just like kind of confused by this, because, as stated before, General Shang is one of the characters from the Chinese faction who basically the heptapods as a hostile threat due to them using the word for weapon. So, of course, in this future conversation, he basically says, I'm so glad to have met you, and I'm so glad that you spoke to me, because the words that you told me really opened my mind up. And she starts trying to fight and wonder what in the world he said. And as this is happening, she's stolen a satellite phone to try to call General Shang. During this, she realizes, how in the world is she going to call somebody and that she doesn't even have the phone number to? And then once again, she sees another vision of the future where the general gives her his phone number, and then he makes an allusion to saying something to the effect of, the words that you told me from my dying wife were some of the most important words that changed my perspective on everything. And at this point, she finally gets the phone number. She starts trying to call the general. And then when the general picks up, she starts to say some words in Mandarin Chinese. And unfortunately, the movie does not give you any translation to what she says, but we'll get to that in a second. And then pretty much just, it kind of finishes out with just all of the countries sort of changing their mind because General Shang all of a sudden changes his mind. And you see sort of like this glut of news articles basically saying societies of Earth are starting to open communications with these beings. We're learning. We're trying to figure out the language and everything. And then, of course, it kind of goes back to both Ian and Louise sort of talking to each other. Louise sees a future where they both get married. They both have a daughter. But what the viewer comes to realize is the depressing visions of her daughter passing away were not visions of the past, but yet they were actually visions of the future to come.
Yeah.
And that she's still willing to get with Ian to get married to him, even though she knows that the future between them will be very depressing.
That was the thing that when the daughter kept popping up in certain scenes, where I was really afraid it was going to be a contact situation where the aliens turned out to be her daughter in some sort of way. I was like, oh no, oh, don't do that. And then when there was a certain scene in the movie where the daughter was playing with clay, and there was the shape of the aliens that were they were one of the clay situations. Like, oh God, no, they're doing it. It's like shit. And that was clever because again, when in the beginning of the movie they make it seem like the daughter dying was the past, and that she is trying to move on by, like you said, by having that university job. But in fact, what was going on was the daughter never was in the picture in the first place when she was in the university when the aliens came. It was she gained the insight of looking at memory non-linearly and was able to see the future and to take care of those issues she was able to do. And I thought that was very clever in that sense. It kind of excused some of the issues that I had when that last 15 minutes happened, when you learn what's going on with her, really. That to me was like, oh, okay. Oh, that's clever. Okay, I get it now. Cool. That's where I had issues before, but then at the end of the movie, I was like, okay, cool. That's great. It's going to be interesting for me when I see this a second time, because I'm going to tell you, when I watched it the first time, I was like, oh God, they're going through these tropes. Oh no. But then, like I said, as time went on and I finally got the context of the film, I was like, oh, that's clever. That's actually pretty good. Okay. So, yeah, I will look forward to seeing it a second time. It is a very good movie if you're into these types of movies, but it is more intellectual and more dialogue-driven than it is more action-based and sci-fi in that case. So, I could see why some were disappointed when they think aliens are coming to the planet, and they were expecting a little more action, but there really wasn't. But it's more intellectually based, and I actually enjoyed that out of it.
The one scene that slightly disappointed me was just when Louise speaks with General Shang, because he recites a phrase in Mandarin Chinese, but it's not subtitled. And for anyone curious to what the phrase was, "War doesn't make winners, only widows." Yeah. And it was kind of one of those things of, that is kind of on the nose. Why did you not add subtitles to that? Jesus.
Probably because it is so on the nose. That's probably why they did that. Because if you did that and you subtitled it, it would have been. I think that would have been a little too on the nose at that point. You telling me that is like, yeah, that's a little bit. That's a little bit too on the nose. So I think that's why they didn't do that. They kept it a mystery for at least American audiences. Go, oh my God, she must have said something really deep and personal, and it was just like it was just that. I guess that's a is it a proverb or is it just like a saying?
I think it's just a saying, but ultimately, I'm definitely with you that this is more an intellectual movie. But some people who have issues with movies that talk about the concept of time in a sci-fi sense might also not like it, because I know I have a feeling some people who are just not into theories about time or time travel might look at this movie and go, oh God, one of these, gross.
Yeah. Yeah, be prepared. If you're going to watch this, be prepared for a lot of dialogue and a lot of political intrigue and stuff like that. It's not going to be a very bombastic, action-packed movie. Expect that. How with your final thoughts of the film?
I quite like the film, especially with just kind of the depiction of how learning a language actually happens, that you start with the basics and everything. The fact that it's a very dialogue heavy movie isn't something that I think is a bad thing. The use of time that they basically set up in the movie, that time is a non-linear construct once you start to learn the heptapod's language, I thought was a very, very interesting thing, especially when that is revealed at the end. It's just something so interesting, especially when you come to the realization that the introduction of the movie was actually a scene of the future, not a scene of the past. And overall, I had a lot of fun with Arrival, both as a polyglot and as a person who does like sci-fi movies. I think for me, this would probably sit at about an 85%.
Oh, nice. 80. Before the last 20 minutes, when the film revealed the twist, I think, because I think the whole time linearity thing was the twist of the movie. I had this at a 2.5 to a 3. I probably was going to lean 2.5. But after the twist was revealed as to what was going on specifically, it bumped it to a 3.5. I think that really helped me reconcile my issues with the film in that sense. It's not one of Amy Adams' best performances. It's also not one of Villeneuve's best films, but I think it's actually a very good sci-fi film in that vein. Part of me wishes this was a little bit longer, but it's not that big of a deal. But this is definitely something I want to watch a second time in, like, let's say a few months and see if I have a stronger resonance to it now that I know the twist. Because sometimes a lot of films, when they have a twist or they have some kind of a thing that shakes up the movie, it doesn't kind of work when you see it a second time. But I'm going to be very curious if it lands from there. So I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5. Good movie. I'm not in love with it like you are, but I know you have a specific attachment to it that makes you really enjoy it. But I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5. Good movie. Better than I thought it was going to be as I was watching it, but very good movie. Okay, Zero. So now that we're back on the saddle, hey, I had an idea from reading an article about a few weeks ago. The Hollywood Reporter had their best films of this century about 2 weeks ago. And number 1 was a very curious movie that I really wasn't expecting from the Hollywood Reporter. I thought it was going to be something along the lines of Moonlight, Get Out, something along those lines. But I thought it would be a good idea we watch their number 1 movie, and it's something I've been really interested in seeing, and I think you're going to be interested in seeing this too. We're going to watch Yi Yi, a 1 and a 2, the 2000 movie directed by Edward Yang. Zero, did you hear about this film before I told you about it?
No, I did not.
Okay. Edward Yang, the director, won Best Director at Cannes that year. And that usually is a big deal. For this to be, I guess, one of his best films, it should be interesting to see here. So I'm looking forward to it. I don't know if you are, but we'll definitely check that out. If you want to watch this movie, you can probably rent it on Amazon Prime. But if you're on the Criterion channel, it is running right now on there. And I think that's how me and Zero are going to watch it. So I'm looking forward to it. What about you? Were you interested when I brought this up?
Yeah, it looked like something very interesting, so I'll be curious to take a watch through it and everything.
All right, well, that is it for this episode of Capital Games Movie Club. Tune in next week where me and Zero watch Yi Yi, a 1 and a 2. And then on Thursday, me and Kim are going to watch Field of Dreams. Until then, I am The Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
And we'll talk to you next week. Bye.